Hello, here we are at episode 32. How the hell did we get here? Well, probably through a load of tangential conversations. But there you go. This could be another one. Because we're talking about being limitless, unlimited, which is quite a large subject in a way. But it can also be something that we focus on quite a lot when we say things like we want to have some freedom, because that sometimes means that some of us are being bound by something that we don't really want. So we're just going to go in there and have a look and see, perhaps mentioning boundaries, because sometimes our clients are coming in with either a lack of someone else's boundaries or a lack of their own, which is causing them problem. So how can we take the boundaries away and still give them an unlimited life? So before we go into that little interesting pocket of the universe, let's say hello to everybody. So Tony, you've not been here for a while. Who are you and where did you come from?
Thank you, Leslie. I'm Tony Gordon, and I'm from East Kilbride, just south of Glasgow. Company's called Changing Your Mind Limited. I'm a growth mindset coach and hypnotherapist. Basically, I work with clients who feel as though they're stuck in a rut, maybe to past trauma, maybe just to career issues, family issues, relationships. And I just give them new solutions, give them processes they can put in place that allows them to take the first step forward to sort of taking back control of their lives.
Cool. So, shall we stick with the men? Willie.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm Willie Nicol, a life change coach, also cop turned coach. I was a police officer for 31 years. And like Tony, I help people work out their own solutions to whatever's holding them back in life or stopping them getting the results they really want. So, limitless, unlimited, it's down to everyone. I don't provide the solutions, they do.
You see, this is it. We're on a roll here now. And it's not a bacon one, but it's getting there. Now, Mary.
Well, I'm Mary Corbett, and I am based just outside Cork City in Ireland. And I support people who get overwhelmed with new jobs and new roles, and I help them perform at work to the very best of their ability. My goal is that they're in the flow and they're not working excessive hours. That's my idea of success for them.
Really?
And that gives them their freedom. For
So
many
boundaries
of them.
again.
Oh, definitely boundaries. I'm big on boundaries.
Tanis.
I'm Tanis Cobbin, and I am from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And I am a Celtic Shamanic High Priestess. I'm a Reiki Master, spiritual coach, and I help people to find their spiritual path and follow what brings them joy.
Cool. All right, Angela with the white headphones.
Do you like them? They're called my electric earmuffs. It's quite good fun. So I'm Angela from Inner Pathways. I'm based in Hamilton in South Lanarkshire in Scotland. I work with lots of different people for lots of different stuff, using primarily kinesiology techniques as well as some hypnotherapy and some coaching. And at the moment, I'm looking for and working with anyone who is just fed up of dealing with symptoms. The symptoms are always there. They don't seem to want to go anyway. And all we're doing and all they feel as if they're doing is currently managing symptoms and never really getting to the root cause of what's going on for them. So that's who I love working with, and just clearing all that away.
And Angela's
And
frozen.
just moving forwards. And moving forwards. I'm on my backup computer at the moment, so it does have a little bit of time where sometimes the fan goes a little bit and it stops everything. I'm back though.
I know about those. Okay. So I'm Leslie Marsh, currently satelliting to you from somewhere in George's Cross in Glasgow. Because I'm dog sitting and he's sitting over there watching me intently at the moment. And
You better
so
do a good job then.
Well, yeah, he does do a very good job, because if he hears somebody putting their key in the lock, he's off. So let's hope nobody's gone out and is coming back again in the next hour or so. But yes, what do I do? Well, multi-modality usage is really how I explain it. There's a toolbox, and throughout the years, I've gathered certain tools for certain subjects and things. And actually, that toolbox is more or less limitless. Because there's always one specific answer for one specific problem. Now, in the old days, I used to read some pulp fiction, and one of them, it wrote in it, and I don't even know if this is true or not, I'm sure somebody will tell me, but there's a quote, Koshan Kosu, every mountain has its own people, which means every problem has its own solution. So that's an interesting thing. Is that a limit thing, or is that a limitless thing? And when our clients are coming to us with these things that we can hear them telling us, but they somehow have their mufflers on when they're saying it, it seems to bypass their inner ear and doesn't go into their head when they say, I'll never be able to do that. I'll never be worthy enough to be this. So, there are boundaries and then there are boundaries and limits. And then there are limitations that we have to deal with different tools. So what are we going to do with these boundaries? Any suggestions, Angela?
Why do we need them? Why do we not need them? I think it depends on the situation as to what people are going through, as to whether or not boundaries are useful, or are boundaries blockers that stop you from moving forward. A lot of the times we talk about boundaries as to, well, what are my boundaries? Who am I allowing into my space? Who am I not allowing into my space? What am I willing to do? What time am I willing to give? And that can be an aspect of a boundary. But then other times boundaries can be seen as brick walls stopping us from doing things. And I guess it depends on your perspective as to which one of those you mean, Leslie.
I was just thinking there about Pink Floyd, but that might be way past your time too. Certain thing called Another Brick in the Wall. And,
I'm aware of the song. It was before my time, but I am aware of it.
Yeah, we always have to get that one in. It kind of sort of is
You
one of the
asked for
things
that
that are on
one.
the rider. Every panel, Angela will say it was before my time.
But you keep setting them up. I've got to keep knocking them down, right?
Well, you see, yeah, do you?
Part of my boundaries. I don't want that to be a boundary.
There you go. There you go. So, yeah, why often say to people that when they're telling their story, basically they get themselves lost in their own story. So they're weaving the cloth of their limitations with the words that they speak and they use. Because words have power, because there's always feeling attached to words, for the most part anyway. Not the ands, if, and buts, the no's and the yeses, and the I musts and I should and I can't and I won't. Mary, how do you come across these?
I would be with you on the power of the language, because when we talk about like boundaries, I think Angela was really hitting the nail on the head. Boundaries can be perceived as a negative as much, whereas I always perceive a boundary as almost like creating a safe space. It's about what's protected, what's minded, rather than what can I not get to, what's blocking me. So I think how we process the words matters. And I think the same comes with whether we're calling the boundaries or they're calling it our limitations or our limitlessness. It's the language we're using feeds the emotions. And I think when we have to be very sensitive to the way I use the language mightn't be the way my clients are using the exact same combination of words. And I think that taking that time to really know, is it boundary as creating a safe space or boundary as blocking me? And there's probably plenty shades of grey in between. That I think it just is so important. And I think it's very easy to, oh yeah, I know what they're talking about. It is so easy to go with the, oh yeah, I know I get what they're saying, without that extra bit of exploration. Because when we do go exploring, you actually can hear where their limits or their limitlessness is actually sitting, or their sense of it.
And one of the most powerful things, particularly in hypnosis, is feeding those words back to them, feeding what they say verbatim back to them. Actually makes them think about it, doesn't it, Tony?
Yeah. And I think it's like the word limits itself. conjures up different things for different people and talk about boundaries and that. Because some people look at limits as like space, and they think space is infinite, or it's something that there is no limit to it. But then we know scientifically they'll say, yeah, but it's 146 billion light years in each direction. So really, there is a limit to it somewhere there. And these are the things that I think the Cottwold is saying is the only limitations we have are the limitations we put on ourselves. And that's what so many clients do. They put their own limitations on. For me, simple way to explain it is what I do with clients is looking at fixed and growth mindset. Fixed mindset people believe and they put themselves into those boundaries. They put themselves into those limitations because of things they've been indoctrinated or heard as a child, been told they're not good enough, been told you can't do this. They grow up with these limitations. They grow up with these boundaries, thinking that's as much as I can do. This is all I'm entitled to do. What they need, and I love what Mary said there, is the language. They need to hear other people like us explaining how to knock these boundaries down or how to move them. Sometimes they don't want to knock it down. They want to still keep something there because it makes them feel secure. But we need to give them options to say, yeah, but just think of that. What would happen if you push that boundary just a little bit more that direction or a little bit this direction? Does it make a big difference? Try pushing it a little bit further next time and keep doing it. So they realise themselves that again, it goes back to that saying, the only limitations are when they're going to stop themselves. They can just keep pushing the boundaries all the time without having to break them, so they don't feel as though they're breaking that rule that they've got, but they're allowing themselves to grow at the same time.
I always think that there might be something beyond the limitations of space in the universe. And it's just that they're working with the resources that they have at the moment and can't see. Because I like to tackle in the as far as we know at the back of that.
Well, I think the
Because we're
universe is
always
currently expanding, so
yeah.
we've not got to limits yet.
Well, somebody says that it's starting to contract. So we've got two kind of views here. And it's one of those things that it sounds like they think it's like a bungee rope of some kind and somebody's going off in one direction and at any moment now it's going to twang and just come straight back in itself and then we'll have another big bang and we'll do it again. So, I hope we keep the tapes. Tanis, what about you? What do you think about boundaries and limitations?
Yeah, I think in many ways, they help us to feel safe, kind of like what Tony was saying. But it's true that it's for us to grow, we have to expand past what we see as our limitations. So we kind of do this and then we come back a little bit. And then we kind of do this and we come back a little bit because we need to feel that safety of being within our own boundaries because that feels safe in general for people. A lot of times our boundaries are the shoulds. And those we can should ourselves to death, really, because we will be stifled. And if we don't grow because of too many shoulds or too many projections, and projections are those things, those limitations that other people put on us. If we don't have a chance to grow, then we can't really thrive. We're here to learn. And the only way to learn is to go a little bit past those limitations, go a little bit past our own should or should nots, just to learn what that's like. And it doesn't mean we're always going to be successful, but that's where learning comes in, right?
We get sucked into that zone, don't we, though? The so-called comfort zone. And I'm with Bandler on this one. I'd rather call it a familiarity zone than a comfort zone, since it's because it's familiar that we find it to be readable, usable, because capable within that boundary, within that space. What do you think, Willie? Because you know a lot about boundaries as far as rules and regulations are concerned, and about how to work inside of them or not, as the case may be.
Yeah, that's my background in law enforcement. There obviously were boundaries beyond which certain activities were prohibited. And it was my job and my colleagues to enforce these boundaries. I'm going to take this to a serious note and quote my old friend Buzz Lightyear, to infinity and beyond. So is there a limit to infinity? We could be here all night. And another one, Clint Eastwood. The man's got to know his limitations before he shoots them. So I have limitations because I'm a man of a certain age and I have certain health conditions. So I won't be playing football or rugby or running any marathons. But that's a practical limitation, I think I would call that, as opposed to a personal limitation, where we limit ourselves because, as you say, we like to stay in our comfort zone, our familiarity zone, because we have this basic need for security and safety. And if we don't have that comfort blanket, security blanket around about us, we become apprehensive. And it's having the ability or the fortitude or courage or whatever to divest ourselves of that security blanket or push the envelope or push the comfort zone, which, as Tana says, is the only way we'll grow. And as Tony alluded to, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you always got, is the old saying. So practical limitations, fine. Personal limitations, particularly those imposed upon us by others, which is very annoying. But my dad said I couldn't do that. Or my wife says I'm not good enough to do that. Okay then. Right. So we can be influenced by other people, and we can be influenced by our own thinking that I'm not good enough, I can't do this, which is all so much nonsense. I won't curse, nonsense, because with the right help from the good people in this room, that these limitations can be pushed, or for that matter, destroyed with the right mindset and the right way of thinking, because I won't let limitations limit me if I can possibly avoid it. My limitations when it comes to technology, that's still a work in progress, but I'm getting there. So the limits we set on ourselves are often false. They're a figment of our imagination because of fear. I'm afraid I can't do that. I'm afraid to try this. I'm afraid to do that. And once we overcome the fear, with the help of us people in here, that's us a long way along the road to getting rid of the limitations and pushing ourselves forward. So that's my view on limitations.
I think it's quite interesting because it's like the superhero stance. You can think yourself into superhero energy by making this stance that you see that somebody else, their perception of what a superhero would look like, has drawn it down. So we have something to say that there is what a superhero looks like, but we don't look like that. The other thing that I was interested in what you were saying there was about the fear factor. And it's actually got to do with, again, as you said, that we're told by our parents, by our authority figures, all the way through our growing up, we are taught fear. It doesn't come built in. There's only two things that we have fear of: is loud noises and falling when we're babies, when we're born. The rest of it, we learn. And it's kind of handed down to us like an heirloom. Somebody else's experiences from centuries ago, before we even had the ways of understanding different things. There are some people who are still locked into certain behaviours and attitudes that, are just useless now. They don't fit the bill. And that's what happens with our universal mind, or our conscious mind, whatever you want to call it. It can still be running patterns that kept us safe when we were 5 or 6 or 7, even 15. But now we're of an age when we don't need that pattern anymore, but we didn't realise that we'd actually made a loop. And we don't know where the off switch is, but actually we do. And as you said, each one of us in this room has been working on themselves for a long, long time. I kind of think that there might be a kind of maverick gene somewhere along the line, because I know that in my family, to a certain extent, well, to a large extent, actually, because if I think of the whole family, there's the maverick side, and then there's the we're just going to follow all the sheep here side. You cannot do this, you cannot go there, you cannot go beyond your station, because bad things will happen.
But I think you find that in lots of families, this consists. There's almost like there's the pattern of thinking that was what you grew up with, and then you've the rebels who decided to have an alternative pattern of thinking. So it's hardly any wonder that we get family clashes, because some stay in one and they don't necessarily even want to see change.
No,
They're
change
not-
is bad as far as they're concerned.
and the world is a terrible place, and everything is stressful, and everything is a problem, and and it's full of bad people, and and I have various friends and family, and I would say, well, they said, oh, there's so much badness around. I said, well, I only meet good people, so don't meet any bad people. And they're still looking at me. They don't get it. I only meet nice people. I could probably count on one hand the number of horrible people I've ever met in my life.
It's like that thing that you say, projection is perception. Perception is projection.
I don't have enough fingers and enough hands to count the number of horrible people I've encountered in my life. Mary.
But on your personal life, as distinct from the
Alright.
work life where it was enforced, I mean, by virtue of what you were doing, you were going to meet the bad ones. It was kind of a given. But
I worked in banking, so yeah, I'll leave that one there.
Everybody has that good essence in them, despite
Right.
their choices. And so I think that may be part of that. Even the bad ones you met, Willie. Most of them have a good portion. Their heart essence is good. They just make really bad choices.
This
Well,
is interesting, because this could be the next subject.
Are people inherently bad or good? Tanis, yes, I agree that deep down there could be a kernel of goodness. But I met some people where that was so deeply buried that it was very difficult to discern. But you're right. I found that if you treated even the bad people with a degree of respect, they would respect you back. Other police officers would just use brute force, which doesn't really engender respect. So anyway, we're going off at a tangent here.
Well, but it's funny saying it, Will, because the way you described it there, that I'm doing a university degree at the moment, and it's psychology and counselling. And the last year's forensic psychology, looking at the difference, people are institutionalised, the difference of that from modern psychology in the mainstream. And the actual module, this is called, is Mad or Bad. That was the book it was written there for it. And it's because, do we determine people, you're right, is inherently bad? Or is it because of boundaries, things that have been made from previous generations that made them that way? Or is it something of the genes or psychologically something that's happened to them that psychosomatically they turn bad? So is it a bit of both? Is it one or the other? And I think it's one of those grey areas that you could look at either side and say, probably does neither. There are a bit of each in them, but not one on either side you would fall down on. But what got me listening to it was somebody I spoke to recently from a little place called St Helens, between Manchester and Liverpool. And she works with children, and she's amazing what she does with children. But she was telling me about how, this we were talking about, how she found certain kids talking to them were totally limited. She has these things she does, and it's amazing. Every half term or break in schools, she provides sessions agreed with the local councils. And the kids are the ones who have nowhere to go. Parents can't look after them during the day. They come to her, and they arrange a wee lunch, and she's a coach and a therapist, but she uses NLP techniques to train them where they're doing it, but they think they're playing games. They're actually learning life skills. But she got a little group of them and said it really hurt them. And these are the way we don't always appreciate how our boundaries keep affecting. You're talking about their generation after generation. And what she found with these kids is when she was talking to them, where do you like to go? And one was talking about going on holiday. They went, where to? They were talking about Manchester. So she thought, now like going to the airport and go there, or Liverpool. But no, they'd never actually been out of St Helens. They'd never left their own area in their life. They've never been anywhere else. And the reason being is because their parents never worked. Their parents hadn't worked. All the way back to great-grandparents never worked. And what they realised was, if each generation keeps signing on, there's a great way they can work the system so that they have a good life without having to do anything else. But these kids then grow up with these boundaries, these beliefs that they can't move from there, that there is no world outside that little boundary area of St Helens. There is no other world out there. When they see TV, it's just like an imaginary, it's an imaginary land. That shows how their perception can be about how we still allow these limitations to work in society. What would the kids be like if someone could teach them that there is things outside that they could have a life and break that boundary, break these limitations that's been put on them. But there must be so many that live that way. So how do they, I don't know nobody else thinks of that, how do you get them out of that when it's been happening so often? I think it's 4 generations now, at least, that have never worked in their life because they know how to work the system. And that's amazing what how boundaries can do.
I think that's across the board though, Tony. It's not just in Helen's.
I was going to
Well,
say
that's
that.
what I mean. This was just one example because it came up in conversation there. But we allow this to happen everywhere. But it amazes me where we've got these kind of then boundaries or limits. How do we stop them from happening?
But for that particular example, I think that's a massive conversation around the benefit system of this country that might not be one we want to tackle today.
Well, not so much that. I'm just thinking of the parents, like, how do you mentally get them out of that?
It's that point that it's almost institutionalized of that mindset of, well, it was good enough for my parents. It's the only thing we've ever experienced. So unless somebody else new comes into the family group or into the social group that can then say to them, there's another way, they're not going to see another way. So I think the challenge is to almost to infiltrate the social group, the family group, however you want to put it, with a slightly wider mindset. And it's such a difficult one to do because when it gets to 3 and 4 generations, it almost feels as if it's so ingrained that there are no other options because nobody else has thought of anything else. And Uncle Bob, who actually left the town and went to Liverpool, we don't talk about him because it's one of those ones that he never came back, or whatever the comment is, or he got a job. What's that all about? We don't understand. And it is that point that it's breaking the cycle. It's smashing the boundaries. It's smashing the limits. It's smashing those brick walls by whatever means that they've got to do that with. But it takes somebody from external to the situation to come in and say, what about this?
I think you're right, because it's a lot of it's because people don't question. Even the next generation don't question it. I remember it was here, somebody told me a great story about cooks, about someone cooking a meal. I think it was a joint. And the mother was teaching the young girl how to cook a joint. And she was doing it and they tie it all up and they tie the 2 ends up and then you cut the ends off. So you cut them off and the kid was looking going, oh, that good meat. It seems to be doesn't make sense. But that's how my mother taught me. So that was fine. The mother was doing it. And then one day the little girl was with the grandmother. And she said, I'll help you. And she went, oh, that's great. So she went to get the joint out and she was tying it all up and she was rolling it and she went to cut the ends off. And the grandmother went, what are you doing? Because when my mum always does that, she told me you did that. She goes, no, that was only because I didn't have a pot big enough. I used to cut the ends off to put it in. But the mother had seen her do that so often. That was her limitation. She kept doing it. So every time I thought that, and each generation we're passing down is you need to do that. Only that size is the perfect joint. It wasn't, you should have had a big pot, nothing big enough to do it. But it showed how stupid sometimes can be boundaries we make just because nobody questions it.
It's about assumptions, isn't it? And assumptions are never a good thing to go with.
They pack it along with beliefs, and the belief is the biggest and hardest thing to change for anybody. You can take the horse to water. Sometimes it will drink a little bit and then it'll just shy away from it. There are so many people who try to get beyond the limitations of their social structure or the social strata, and they are brought back down very heavily because the people they are trying to leave don't want to be left behind, but they won't go forward. It's easier to pull the other one back. So yeah, I think Angela's right. That's a big conversation.
It's familiar.
Yeah, it's familiar for them.
Comment of pushing and pushing and pushing. Their pushing's maybe that size, and it's not comfortable, so they go back. Not comfortable, so they go back.
It's like when you stop smoking, because there's an identity factor in being a smoker. All your friends smoke, everybody's okay with it. Nowadays, you'll go into the smoking areas and you stand there and have a chat, and then you go back up and you do whatever you need to do with it. But there's a kind of tribal identity of being a smoker. And then one of you wants to stop. The first thing, as soon as anybody says, I'm trying to give it up, and the operative word is trying. They don't say I gave up. They say I'm trying to give it up. So only trying then? Here, have a fag. Why don't you have a fag? Have a whiskey with it. You know, you one in one hand, one in the other when you're totally balanced. It's New Year! fire. Go on, do it, party season. And that's one of the biggest fallbacks, is the social aspect. So it
Peer
depends
pressure.
on the, yeah, it's the familiar.
Mhm.
It's the automatic reaction. Something happens, you go for the cigarette packet.
But that
Well,
tribal piece is very powerful, and I think more so since they ended up having smoking rooms and smoking areas, because they are their own tribe. And when
Yeah.
you're a non-smoker, you're not in the tribe. When you're a smoker, you're in a different tribe. But when you're hovering between the two worlds, you have no tribe. So in addition to everything else, you've no tribe. You're tribeless, and we like tribes.
Yeah, because the limits are there, the boundaries are there. We know what we're doing within that spectrum. We know where we are.
We're also a social animal that likes to be around people.
Yeah, we go in packs like cigarettes.
As a non-smoker, and I've never tried it, I wouldn't know from that perspective. But there we go.
Yeah, I'm the same. I've never smoked, so I have no
Neither.
idea what it
Well,
was.
in the oldie days when Willie and I were alive and kicking, you could go to the shop and get singles if you didn't have the money to buy a whole packet or a pack of 5 or a pack of 10, because you used to get that. You could buy singles and a match.
Used to buy them off the ice cream van. Ice cream
Yeah,
van, you can get singles off. You used to open
yeah,
the
there
pack
were
up and sell
some
singles to
interesting
all the
things you can
kids.
get off the ice cream van in Easter House, I can tell you.
That's where I grew up, was Easter House. That's
Now
why
it
probably I know
makes
the same ice cream
sense.
van we're talking about then.
I knew I'd seen you somewhere. But yeah, so it's like we have so many different layers of boundaries, of limitations, that some of which we put on ourselves. But when we get into it and we start realizing that we're attracting also those things, we were talking earlier on about how we end up in the jobs that we end up in and how we see things, like Willie was saying, I could tell you all the bad people I see because that was all I saw. But of course, Willie was putting a uniform on and he was going out every day looking for these people. So he found them. And then because he
not
was
necessarily looking for them, they just kind of came across my path, as it were.
yeah, but sometimes they ran away and you had to go and find them.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things as well. It's like there's a whole lot of set of emotions attached to every situation, whereby we kind of like to be in there and comfortable in that space. But like Sheldon and his couch, if somebody sits in his space, he knows there's been another bottom on that chair. And he knows because it doesn't feel right. And when something doesn't feel right, you will just tend to look and see where it's gone wrong and pull it back in again to make yourself feel comfortable.
And it's that perception bit again, isn't it? Does it really feel wrong? Or is it just different?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we were saying that there's that saying, every man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist.
Mhm.
You know, so it's perception again. Which end of the stick are you on?
So
And we
from the
can
same
say,
perspective, which side of the boundary are you on?
yeah, yeah. And who made that boundary? And was it their right to do that? Do we have a right? And I think that's part of the issue as well with some of the clients that we can see, is that they feel they don't have their right to go beyond those boundaries.
Yeah, you get
Being
one to
told that,
say that I've not been given permission. They
yeah,
don't believe that themselves given themselves permission. Someone else has to give them that permission
yeah,
before they can do it. And I love a thing with him is like Roald Dahl. I think it was when he actually did it at the end of Charlie and Chocolate Factory. There was a great book after that, but no one ever seems to know about, called The Glass Elevator.
yeah,
And it's all about the one that I use at people is we keep talking about this glass ceiling, but people limit themselves with a ceiling. That's as far as I can go. But that's a kid's book, and he showed in there, but just an elevator break through the ceiling. You can go wherever you want to, but what was great about that is it was your imagination, wherever that took you. How that happened or the way it happened is in your own imagination. I get trying to get clients to think of that. It's funny, I use something, Willie mentioned something for We Come On, is the title of this show sounds like an 80s band. Unlimited, right? So if you're living unlimited, there was a band in the 80s called Living in a Box. And I actually use that for an analogy for a lot of clients. Is living in a box. The song was called Living in a Box. And that is what a lot of people do. They do live in a box. And they hear the saying, think outside the box. But they don't really understand what that means. So it's trying to explain to them about how they can actually do that is how do you knock these barriers down then? How do you knock these limitations down, where can you go? And it's get a bit like saying hypnotherapy is brilliant for it, because future pacing up when you get them in there to go and imagine what it's going to be like when you achieve these things. And I did it with somebody the other day who for 50 years was holding on to something, and then she's let this go now. But when you look at the future and realizes that it's so open, it's so wide now, because that weight's not there, that responsibility's not there, and now they know they can give themselves permission to do what they want to do. And they didn't understand the tears and everything, but that's the release. That's your actual mind actually letting you know now it understands what it's got to do. But see, when you do see a client that gets that, there is no better feeling on this earth when they watch it and their eyes go, and they're the one, like Willie said earlier, they're the one that realizes what they've got to do. You don't, you're just guiding them to that point. But it just to guide them to the fact is to open their imagination, and these limitations can disappear, these boundaries can disappear. Then they can make new ones, the new ones that suit them for the rest of their life. That's an amazing thing.
I
Sorry,
think
what
a
was
Or
the-
program
realise that they can always move.
Yeah, there used to be a program
On
on called
wheels.
Wanted Down Under. And it would take these people, these couples who wanted one of them, not both of them, one of them wanted to move to Australia or New Zealand or something like that. So the program would pay for them to go out there for a week and show them the different options, etc. And basically, it's like, oh yeah, this is really great, and yeah. And there's always one that's a little bit reticent about moving. And it's usually, like you said, Tony, there are people who don't move. The family lives in the same street or the same village, as the whole thing is there. So they have this real support system. Now, is it a support system or is it an anchoring situation where, you're just being held under with boulders of social convention and guilt factors? But there's one of those things that when they do this thing, the program do it, and the psychologists must have been sitting rubbing their hands with glee when they got hold of this one. Because it's a bit like Milner, and it's very much this idea of, we're going to sit you down in the telly, we've just shown you all this good stuff that you could do, you can have this wonderful house that's your own, you've got the sunshine, you've got the better pay, the better hours, the whole situation's going on, you can go really far, your kids will have a great education, they'll be able to travel the world because that's what they do, because they realise they're on an island continent, so they want to go and see the rest of the world, kind of thing. And you've got all this stuff going on, and they're getting bombarded with this and bombarded with it all the time. Then they sit them in a room in front of a television with messages from home. They've only been away for 3 days, but still they're sitting in there. Oh, we don't want you to go. It's not nice. I don't like it when you're not here. Who's going to have my tea with me on a Monday morning? And it's like, and I sit there and I go, are you kidding me? Then again, I'm not that particularly connected that way. But at the same
Or if you're
time,
cynical, that's the TV producer saying, going to ham it up for us.
well, I tell you, there's some questions going on, and they will pick the ones and put the ones on, because I'm sure there's a few there that actually, and somebody might have said something to them, because they did have some saying, go for it. Don't worry about here, because it doesn't matter, Granny's on her last legs. Yes, you just heard your mum saying that, but even if you're living next door to her, you still wouldn't get there in time.
This is where I have an issue with the oxymoron that is reality TV. There is
You
nothing.
mean
it's
how they've
never
got a
real.
script?
Never.
There's
It's
nothing
never
real about
real.
it. Right? There's nothing real about it. There's always as you see, the two people go out there, and one's really up for it, and the other one's, but these two words, but usually followed by a negative. But I can't do that. But that's impossible. But
That's
you can all be
scary.
put together, go Abbott.
Yeah.
So the Abbott people,
Where's Costello?
they're the ones who don't
That's
want to
beyond
change.
you as well.
Someone told me that there's only two things in life that are certain: death and taxes. And I would add a third: it's change.
Yes.
Change is inevitable. It's just as inevitable as death and taxes. But people don't like change. Right? They prefer to stay in we'll use the word comfort zone, because it's familiar, it's safe, it's secure. And the thought of leaving that comfort zone is fear engendering, if you like, right? But if you don't change, you don't kind of grasp the nettle and push a bit, nothing's going to change, and you'll stay stuck where you are. And it's only when if you put to a client, imagine what your life would look like if, good thing, or allow yourself to imagine what your life would look like should you change. And that starts the ball rolling when they say, right, okay, I can allow myself to do that. Yep. I can allow myself to imagine. Yep. I can allow myself to imagine a better whatever. And that sets the ball rolling. Because if you don't give them that gentle shove, they will stay exactly where they are. And as Tony said, that if that solution or something like that doesn't present itself, you give them a wee nudge. I've nudged loads of people, it's great. And then when they get the light bulb moment, oh right, okay. That's very gratifying. The tears and the heaving shoulders, yes, that is very gratifying too, when you realise that a bubble has burst or a dam has burst or whatever. But allow yourself to imagine what your life would be like if the thing that you want were to come to pass. Why not?
As we know, imagining things like that can manifest some wonderful things. If we
I-
put
I
our
like
mind to it.
The rocking chair situation. It's a thing you can do. I don't have hypnotherapy, I've done it in NLP. And it's taking someone to end of life and they sit in the rocking chair and imagine just on a little veranda thing, looking out to sea or the country, wherever they like. And they imagine two different paths in life. One path is if they didn't change, what they would have got out of life before they got there. Imagine the other path now, what could happen, what would happen, and let their imagination just run with what could have done if they do take that step. It's a bit like the fork in the road. Down that, take it, but somebody's got to realise there's not a straight road all the time. You might go back sideways to go forward. But what the end result, the outcome, what that would achieve like. And when you get them to do that, it's amazing how many of them decide, I'll go and try something different today. Because when they realise, look back, you don't want to be at the end of your life looking back and saying, I wish I could have, or the times where at the beginning, I should have. These are things we always can do. But why wait? Because Willie said it's too long to do it. Why not have that wee nudge and have a go and see what you think of it and just let your imagination go? That's
really your backyard, isn't it, Mary? Because you're do that with your clients all the time, don't you?
I do, and actually, when we were talking earlier, Tony, where you mentioned about the people who lived in this generational unemployment where they never moved, they never do. We had a very famous governor of Mountjoy Prison, which would be the largest prison in Ireland, and one of the most interesting things that the man ever came out with was the importance of kindness. And I think that when people feel the kindness and the compassion, they're a much better place to give it a go.
Yeah.
And I think that wrapping them in that sense, like he did an awful lot of work with kids and vulnerable, he did tremendous work, as and you don't think of it. The governor of the prison was doing brilliant work to mind people and bring them on and give them skills. You just don't have that mental association. But his big thing was kindness. And I think that because of the work we do, that having that sense of kindness around people and having them really feel it, their capacity then to be able to say, maybe I could give it a go. I'm not going to be jumped on. I'm not going to be judged. I'm not going to be given a hard time for this. It just instills in them, I might try it. And all they need is one tiny, tiny, tiny little step. And then they'll try a bigger step and a bigger one. So I sometimes think that, sometimes we want people to take the big steps too early. And it's great when they do take the big step and the big jump. And sometimes it's a very tiny step. So they're even just that one tiny move, a push against the boundary, that for them is huge. And that confidence and that been surrounding them with kindness when they do it, actually, no matter what the outcome, I always believe will get them another little bit further.
And for some people, that tiny step can be monumental. So I worked with a coach last year who's one of our favourite quotes was, nothing changes if nothing changes. And it's such a simple concept, but it's a really good one to remember.
I think all clients should realise that the fact I tell everybody, all my clients, I've got a growth mindset. The company want to find one. I said, you've all got one because you've took the first step by coming to me in the first place. That means
Yeah.
you've got a growth mindset because you want to move on. You want help. So just like Mary's saying there, if you remind every client that comes to you, you've already taken that first step. You've done it. It's what you do it now that counts. How you move forward from here. How are you going to do that? What way do you want to do it? And that's what we help them with. We help me guide them to get to that. It's that Lao Tzu statement, is it? That every journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. And that's all they've got to do. But by coming to you, to me, they've already taken that first step. And when people realise that, they're already a part of the way to getting help. Because they get that in their mind, they that belief, I've actually done something. They've achieved something just by coming to see you in the first place.
And that's where I think some of the stuff we do on social media is useful, because their first step might just be liking a post.
Yeah.
That might be as far as their first step is, or it might be even just logging on and lurking in the background and reading it.
Yeah.
You know, but they have to do that first step.
Awareness is really key. So when we learn something new, that is a change. So we learn every day. So, you know, my theory is we're never the same person 2 days in a row, even if we're not aware that we aren't. Because every day we have the opportunity to shift our perception on the world around us or on how we do things. Not everybody steps into that, but we're exposed to different things every day, you know, if you're out and about. But we're not always aware that we're making those little changes every day. So I think
there's also the reticence. There's reticence about doing it, because if I do that, what am I going to have to do next? And can I do that? How's that going to change everything? Because there's the ecological fallout as well. Somebody decides to do something in their family that they've never done before. Maybe it's they were supposed to go into the same job as their father or their mother or whatever. And then suddenly they sit and they have the awareness to say, I don't want to do that. I really don't want to do that. I want to go off and be a something or other. Elephant keeper, maybe. And basically, the parents are so involved and embroiled in what they think is right for the child. They never stop seeing the child as something that needs to be controlled, be chosen for, be told things to, and never really released from that. How many times have you ever heard a grandmother say, yes, but she's always my daughter. She might be your mother, but she's also my daughter. And yet there's a whole cycle being taken there. So we have this whole kind of structure, like these boundaries. And yeah, boundaries are good. Let's face it, the skin is a boundary. The skin is a city limits, and if you don't have skin, everything's just going everywhere. So there are practical reasons for having boundaries. But
on that point, you can push the boundaries. So the more cake you eat, the wider your boundaries get, right?
Oh yeah, as Tannis was saying, we're growing every day. We're expanding. Our universe is expanding every day. The more cake we eat, the more universe we get. You know, it's simple. To make the universe contract, you just need to not eat so much cake and do a little bit of exercise. So they tell me. But anyway, it's one of those things. You know, we're looking at January. We're looking at the new year. We're looking at the time when people make resolution, or they might say they don't. But there always is, and I always say to people, even when I was a smoker, if you want to give up smoking, you have to want to give up smoking. Not for anybody else, because someone else is telling you that you should give up smoking but because you want to give it up for your own self. Until that happens, the first sign of trouble, you are going to head for nicotine.
But I think that's true of every New Year's resolution. There's an awful lot of I shoulds in New Year's in traditional New Year's resolutions. I should lose weight. I should get more exercise. I should give up the cigarettes. I should get the new job. I should. If it's starting from I should, it does not happen because you're not emotionally connected to it.
The thing is, we have too many on the list. We should have a list of one. You might have a lot of things.
So can I just pull you up on we should have a list of one? My question more is maybe, why are we using the word resolutions when it's got such negative connotations? Perhaps using planning, perhaps using intentions, perhaps using this month, my plan will be to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, but we've got
Why wait
resolutions
till January
because
to
that's
do
the
something anyway? You
So
can do
that's what
now.
I'm saying. So do it
Yeah, do
this
it now.
week, this
Don't need to
month.
wait till then.
And
resolution
I
is about
prefer to use
resolve.
my intention. My intention is, it is my intention to do something.
Yeah. So
I think
I
you could
dissolving
use
the
the-
stress around the word resolution.
if you
Sorry,
use the word
Willie.
resolve with courage and resolve, I will do this. Right, so there is a certain power to resolve. Resolutions, not so much. As
Mm.
Tony
I think
alluded to earlier, language. If you say, I should quit smoking, I should lose weight, I should go to the gym. Right, to me, that is, you're imposing a sort of command on yourself, and no one likes being told what to do, even by themselves. So if you reframe that to a desire, I will stop smoking. I'm going to stop smoking. I will stop smoking. See if I don't, right?
Or
And that's
even be
that's
sneakier.
a goal to aim at rather than I should stop smoking. Well, I'm not really going to bother. Right? So it's just the use of language. And yes,
Do it sneakily.
resolutions are always going to get broken.
Yeah, do it sneakily. Don't mention that you're not going to do something. I know as soon as I mention the word diet, I get hungry. And and it's one of those, but if I think about the end result of what I will be able to do when I make that change, then it doesn't actually, I mean, that's how I ended up married. So it does work and it does get me in trouble. So that's another story. But it's one of those things.
Maybe we'll do an interview with you, Leslie, all about that topic.
No, don't do that. Oh, he came to one of my workshops and I kept him. It's something that you do occasionally.
That's
Occupational
not something
hazard.
that's not something as therapists we do often.
No.
Just
No.
Leslie.
No,
Just Leslie
he wasn't.
like
He
that,
wasn't.
yeah.
He wasn't a therapy. It wasn't a therapy workshop. So, but my goodness, the therapy came in handy.
So I think we also have to keep in mind that if we don't live up to our own expectations, that we're being forgiving for ourselves as well. Because I think we tend to get into a downward spiral about things, So if we say we make a New Year's resolution that we're going to do this, and then we don't, then we get discouraged. And it puts us back further on our journey rather than pushing us forward. So if we can be forgiving of ourselves as we go along the journey, I think it helps to keep us motivated to
I
try.
think there's that phrase that if you can't be anything else, just be kind.
Yeah.
When do we think we can be kind to other people? When do we be kind to ourselves?
Exactly.
When do we give ourselves a break? So if we break that resolution, think, oh my goodness, that's the whole, everything's up in the air now. So what? You're only human. I've broken umpteen resolutions, right? But I don't beat myself up about it anymore. So not only be kind to other people, be kind to yourself, right? We often beat ourselves up with negative self-talk. We say, oh God, that was rubbish. I didn't do that well. That failed miserably, right? Why do we do that? There are times we talk to ourselves where had someone else talked to us in the same manner, we'd have probably punched them in the jaw. Right? So why do we do it to ourselves? Because we do. So be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up.
I think our self-compassion, our self-kindness should be totally unlimitless.
Yes.
Yeah.
There should be zero
agree.
limit to the extent to which we will express our kindness and compassion for ourselves. It has to be without limit.
And that's a skill that a lot of people don't grow up with that.
Yeah, we don't ask the right questions when we get to that stage because we're on automatic pilot, I think, to a certain extent. And I know this one quite well. But it's one of those things also that when you say that you want to change, the first thing that someone else will say is, what are you doing that for? What's the point in that? Because what they're doing is they're projecting their idea of what they won't do or feel that they are unable to do. And they don't understand like me with the television program, don't understand how people can choose to have a dream and then not go there because they might be leaving someone behind. We all leave people behind. We have to. We don't get to stay here all the time.
But for
Otherwise, it'd
some
be pretty-
people, for as long as I can keep my people close, I'm going to do my damnedest to make it happen.
yeah, no matter whether it's actually good for them or me.
Well, you said you can choose. You can choose to change. Very quick story. When I stopped being a security consultant and was made redundant, and I took up coaching, a very long-standing friend, when I told him what I was going to do, was extremely dismissive to the point of being rude. And this is a man I went out for a pint with every weekend. And one night we were out and I was explaining what I was going to do, helping people, coaching, etc. Rubbish. You'll never make any money. Not a chance. So I went home and I was in a bad mood. And my wife asked me, "You've been at the pub for a couple of enjoyable pints. Why in a bad mood?" And I told him. And the guy's name was Jim, sadly no longer with us. I said, "Jim really pissed me off. He's not accepting that I'm choosing to change and develop, and etc., etc." And she came out with a very, what I thought was a very perceptive comment. He says, "Well, he's afraid. You're changing and he doesn't like it. You're no longer old Willie. You're now new Willie. And he doesn't like it because you are drawing away from him. And he's afraid he's going to lose you." I thought, all right, okay. And that got me to thinking, do I divest myself of people who are not supportive? And it did cross my mind. However, I took a deep breath and said, well, if he doesn't understand, he doesn't understand. And we got over it and moved on. But there's another thing about changing. Well, what will people think? There's a judgment that, what will they think about me? What will they say about me? Well, I better not do that. No, not going to do it. Well, can I just tell you, ladies and gentlemen, just do it. Because other people, their opinions don't matter. To me, it's a question of mind over matter. I don't mind what they think because it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
I really
other
love
people's
The guilt.
other people's opinions are none of my business.
Correct.
No, I think
I've
that's one
had
of the biggest
clients that have-
things with resolutions in it cause it. Why do people have to tell someone else they're doing it? See, if you don't tell them, it makes it a lot simpler to actually keep going with it. It's the fact you tell people they know.
Or to stop and not feel guilty about it.
Yeah. So you be kind to yourself. Just don't tell anybody you're doing it, and if you break it, nobody knows. So that's fine.
There is something about accountability, and actually it's quite nice to work on things together with other people. But yeah, I get your point as well. It depends on the situation.
What Willie just said, some people aren't, and there's always that saying as well that what did they say about the 5 people closest to you is how you'll actually move on with things. And if you don't have the right people around about you when you're trying to change, it can be really difficult because everybody said that there's things always pulling you back. So you need to make sure if you're changing, you are changing for the right reasons in the right environment. It's like Maslow's hierarchy again, because the environment will always be somewhere bringing you down to change your behaviour and your skills because you're trying to adapt. But not everybody wants you to change. They always get the same, don't they? I like you the way you are. They don't want you to change. That's the way they'll put it to that guilt. Because back to Leslie's thing about the programme, it's like that guilt trip putting on you. Yeah, I don't mind you going, but I'll be really hot, but you can go. They cry always with his tears and you can go, but at the same time they're telling you not to go. So it's the same thing when people say, "Oh yeah, do it." I don't think you'll make it, but you can try it anyway. They always seem to do it with a sort of a double-edged sword on it. So why not tell anybody? Just do it yourself and push yourself on, or judge with the people you know will support you around about when you are going to be accountable.
It's almost a cultural thing to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many people who I grew up with who are still in the same place, maybe just half a mile away from the house they grew up in, and believing that they can't do it. And some of them are like, yeah, it's great to hear that somebody else has done that. I just don't know how. I don't want to do that. I got married, I had kids, now I'm stuck. Why? And I think that the other thing is that we have a limitless and unlimited cache of guilt. It is spread about like peanut butter on a jelly sandwich. Everywhere it's slathered. Anytime anybody decides to do something, someone else is going, "Oh, who the hell do you think you are?" Oh, little elf arrow. Boom.
Perhaps that's back to Mary's point. Are you surrounding yourself with the wrong people? because
Yeah.
Mary's comment is that she's surrounding herself with good guys. Tony's comment is tell the folk that are going to support you. So create your own echo chamber. All the big
Yeah.
social medias do it for us. Create your own. Pick the folk that are going to support you. Pick the folk that aren't going to say, who do you think you are? You can't do that. Where do you think you get the right to do whatever? Pick the people that are going to support you and who are going to be your cheerleaders.
For a lot of people, though, that's their families.
But if their families are not being their cheerleaders, find somebody else.
Well, it's true. You can. There's Janice. In
Well,
in the
it's
shamanic
networking,
world, we
isn't
have
it?
the
It's called
bloodline and we have
networking.
the
Find the
milk
people
line.
you network will do it. Willie made a great thing with it is you can choose to change. So why can't you choose the people to help you to change?
Sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you've got all this.
Yeah. So I'm
Limit
talking about when
boundary
you're
of-
aware of it.
Yeah, but even then, there's so many people who are aware that, I mean, I've got a cousin who writes like, you know, she could knock Stephen King out for the count. She has great writing style. She has great stories and she's really, really good at it. She won't do anything about it because she doesn't believe that she's able to do it. She's aware she can do it. She enjoys doing it, but she puts that in a little box.
That's kind of like the imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
We,
What I was going
we
to
could
what I
be
was saying
doing
about-
something and still
I was-
feel like we're not capable of doing it, even though we're
Yeah.
doing it
I mean, it's
because
like
of our programming.
I strangely enough now have an adopted daughter. She adopted me, not the other
Whether you
way
wanted
around.
it
I
or
hasten
not.
to ask whether I wanted to or not. I'm now adopted again. But anyway, as I was saying to Janice there, bloodline and milk line, as far as families are concerned, bloodline is what you're stuck with. Milk line is what you choose.
Mhm.
I have a milk line that's absolutely stronger than anything. There's a bit of bloodline that I don't really know.
Mhm.
However, it doesn't stop it from making its inroads into how I see life. And I think that that's got something to do with genetic memory and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But there are things that when it comes to it, and that for me is a limitless thing. I know those people are there. I've never met them. I think I've emailed one of them and spoken to one of them on the phone. But there's like 259 of them.
Mhm.
So that to me means that there's somewhere in the world, in the area, general morphogenic field, where I'm making choices and decisions that may well be a teeny tiny bit affected by that knowledge,
Mhm.
by how their culture is, what their culture is about. And that originally was about freedom, which is, you know, my big thing. Being unlimited as to what and where I can be at any given time. I mean, I was talking to my cousin the other day and I said, we were talking about how cold it was. And I said, yeah, I said, I always pick houses that are cold and damp. Maybe I'm just supposed to live in a yurt. Maybe warmer, wood stove and all that. Small house. But it's one of those things that's a dream. That's a goal. And I could have the resolute resolve to go there. Deep inside, I probably have. I may end up there yet. Who knows? I may be working towards that when I want to go to a warm country. But it's one of those things that when you think about it, we put the limitations on ourselves.
Mhm.
We may have been gifted them. They may come out in a silver tray by the wee butler of the family saying, here, have that. But we're the ones who choose to take it. We're the ones who choose which ones we're going to live up to and which ones we're going to live down to. We may not think or believe that we have a choice, but everyone in this room can tell you that we do. It's an interesting thing, making choices. The what if question comes up every so often. And very many people think of the what if question as a negative. What if it goes wrong? Now, what if it goes right? What if you find something that is so totally out with your ken? Forget Barbie, we're not talking about her. That basically, you're going to learn something new. You're going to find a facet of yourself that's been sitting waiting in the wings, looking at his watch, tapping its feet and going, really? You found me now? Where have you been? Something that you've dreamed of. This is January. This is Janice's time. This is the time where you step over the threshold, go through the door. This is the time where you can leave behind the stuff that you don't want. Even if you're not aware of it, there's something there that's dragging behind that you keep pulling through every door, every year. What would happen if you left it behind and picked up a new wardrobe through the other side of the door? How many limits do you put on yourself every day? Is your world smaller than it could be? And I'm not saying should be, but how small are you choosing to make your world?
I think that's a good thing. Is I love every client to say that all options are limitless. Just what your choices are going to be from now on. How many people in this room, when they were leaving school, looking at their careers, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a hypnotherapist, a life coach, a shaman, going to whatever. How many people actually said that when we were younger?
I knew
Nobody.
exactly
But
what I
look
wanted to
at what you've
do.
all done. You said something great there. Like, somebody said to me a couple of years ago when they asked about why it took so long to do this. They said, you're in the place you're meant to be now. You just never knew you were always meant to be here. I had to live the life I've led to get me to here to be able to help the people that I now help. It's because what I've been through then, I've learned the life skill as well as all the training that I've now done to do this, same as everybody else in this room. And that's what I tell the clients is, they say what you're doing, that what could you do now? Well, what is it you want to do? What could you do? But look at your life skills you've got. And a lot of people don't realise how transferable the skills are and the jobs they're in. They think that's the only job I can do is this. But when you break it down for them, they go, I never knew I could do all that. So you look at all these jobs that I'm going, you can now do all of this. It's a bit like what Mary Personnel, I used to help people in their first management role. And they thought they really did the skills. They were scared to go for the interviews until you sat down and looked at that. Because again, it's their perspective. But the options were there. All they've got to do is open their imagination. You open it up, there's so much choice for you there. It is limitless. Because imagination is limitless. There's no way about you can put on your imagination except what you do yourself.
So in the end, life is a bit like flat pack furniture. Sometimes there's a bolt left. What would you do with that? Have a great time this month. I hope you had a Merry Christmas and you had a Happy New Year. And I hope that if you made a resolution, that you kept it quiet and didn't tell everybody, or you chose a particular person that you knew would have your back and will help you. Even if it doesn't work for you, they'll help you to say, at least you tried. At least you thought about it. At least you were aware that there was something you wanted to do. We're aiming for somewhere. I shot an arrow into the air. Where it landed, I don't care. Or I aimed an arrow and I hit the mark. There's a little bit between there. It really is up to us. Each one individually, it's up to us. When we need help, all we have to do is ask. And when we ask, we need to perhaps have a think about who would be the right person to ask. And I'll let you in a wee secret. If when you ask somebody you don't like the answer, what you really want is what they didn't say. So we'll see you next time. And thank you everybody for coming again. And have the happiest of New Year's that you can, because we're never happy all the time, but it's the little moments that make it all worthwhile. So bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.